So of all the different Hasbro teams to appear at this year's San Diego Comic-Con, the team that I thought had the best showing was hands down the G.I. Joe team. Right now they are streets ahead of the Star Wars Black Series team, they're streets ahead of the Marvel Legends team, and whatever happened to the Indiana Jones team. No reveals at San Diego Comic-Con? Yeah, that line's done. But I was really impressed with the G.I. Joe team and the announcements, the new reveals that they had at this year's San Diego Comic-Con. So I'm going to go through these one at a time. I'm also interested to hear your thoughts. Did you like the new reveals from the G.I. Joe Classified team at this year's San Diego Comic-Con? Let me know in the comments below. All right, let's get into it. Stay tuned.
Come with me, toy fans.
Hey toy fans, my name is Tony and welcome back to the Analog Toys YouTube channel. And let's kick things off by sorting the wheat from the chaff. And let's talk about the Python Patrol Cobra Officer and the Python Patrol Copperhead. And I've got to say straight away that I was not a fan of the Python Patrol or the Tiger Force back in the 80s. And when the G.I. Joe team does this in the modern 1:12 scale, I have the same thoughts. I'm just not into it. The figure sculpts look good, the accessories, I do like the weapons that come with the Cobra Officer. If it is even a Cobra Officer, I'm not sure, Cobra Trooper, whatever it is. But the Python Patrol just does not do it for me. At least they only had these two render reveals for us to deal with. Now let's get on to something a lot better. And that's General Hawk, and this figure looks amazing. General Hawk here looks very much like he appeared in the classic 3 3/4 inch range back in the 1980s. He's got his brown leather bomber jacket. It's got some what looks like to be some really nice looking weathering on this jacket. You've got the fur-lined collar there, some embellishments on the chest, and it appears as though he's got that classic looking helmet that we also saw come with Bazooka, but this time obviously it's got the General's star on the front of the helmet. You know, the star on the helmet does look really good. The little bit of gold does really pop. And it looks as though we get two different sets of goggles. I'm assuming one with a longer strap where it can be, the goggles can go on top of the helmet, and then a shorter strap where it can be worn over the figure's head. A really nice looking sculpt. I particularly like the little touches of grey in his hair. A little bit of a Reed Richards thing going on there with a tuft of grey in the front as well. But a very stern looking face. If the sculpt on the actual figure looks anything like this render, it's going to be potentially one of the best of the year. He comes with two different sidearms, one to go in the holster on his belt and then one to go in the across the shoulder holster. A really nice looking tactical shotgun and what appears to be something of a grenade launcher that looks like it should probably belong a bit more with Gun-Ho than with General Hawk. General Hawk, you know, the action figure, the 3 3/4 inch action figure in the 80s, he only came with a helmet, a backpack and a pistol. I'm not opposed to him having, you know, a combat shotgun here, but I don't necessarily think a general should be carrying around a grenade launcher. But hey, I'm not going to complain about an extra weapon accessory. You can just part it out and give it to another figure in your collection. And another heavy hitter straight on the heels of General Hawk is Shockwave, and this was a super cool action figure back in the 80s. I really liked it. All my friends liked it. I never owned Shockwave. One of my best friends had Shockwave and I would borrow him from time to time. It was a really cool character from the 80s and I think they've done an excellent job reimagining this figure for the modern G.I. Joe Classified line. This version remains faithful to the camouflage scheme that appeared on the figure in the 80s, slightly more updated, you know, that with that digital camo pattern effect. He comes with two submachine guns, which is potentially a little bit excessive, but, you know, again, a bit like General Hawk, I'm not going to complain about an extra weapon. I think he only really needed to come with one. But he's got two knives. It looks like one goes in his boot, one goes in the sheath on his tactical vest. He's got a nightstick and then what I believe is a riot shield. And this is super cool. I really like this riot shield. And the addition of the crossed out Cobra symbols on the riot shield is a very nice touch. That's, you know, him ticking off the Cobras that he's taken down on operations. Again, another 1:12 scale G.I. Joe that is remaining incredibly faithful to the original character. And this is also an example of how the G.I. Joe Classified team have really righted the ship. I've been very, very vocal that I was not happy with, certainly not the first wave of G.I. Joe Classifieds, but even several waves into it. They weren't quite clicking, they weren't quite gelling. And now the products we're getting now and a lot of the stuff that was announced throughout 2022, they really have honed in, they've dialed in those retro designs, updated them where they should be updated. Not everything's a hit. There are still a number of misses for me. I'm really not a fan of Shipwreck and that god-awful face sculpt on Flint. But when they're firing on all cylinders, the G.I. Joe Classified team really are producing some excellent action figures. And this digital render of Shockwave is just proof positive that when they're on, they're on. And sometimes when they're off, they can be really off. But when they're on, they're on. And Hawk and Shockwave, they really tick a lot of boxes for me. Now we have the digital render reveal for Agent Helix. And this is a very deep cut. You know, this is not from my era of G.I. Joe. This is not a Real American Hero from the 1980s. But the fact that the Classified team are even introducing characters like this, and this isn't the only deep cut they've done throughout the history of G.I. Joe Classifieds, but it's kind of showing to me that the success of this brand is enabling them to come out with very well-known characters like General Hawk and Shockwave, but also to come out with deep cuts like this. And I'm sure this is down to the success of the brand. In fact, the volume of reveals that they showed at San Diego Comic-Con far outstripped the Star Wars team, the Legends team, and I think it's proof that it is probably one of the best performing 1 to 12 scale action figure lines that Hasbro currently own. Now we get to the really good stuff, the Dreadnoks. I know not everybody likes the Dreadnoks. I was a fan of them in the comic books. I was a fan of the action figures. And I have always thought it weird. Okay, we got Zartan, I think, in 2020 or 2021, and that was one of my best figures of the year. But then they followed that up with Zorana, and I thought Zorana was a bit of an odd choice for the first Dreadnok. But here they've dropped 2 digital render reveals of Buzzer and Ripper, as well as a name-only reveal for Torch. And they have nailed, absolutely nailed these figures. Buzzer looks incredible. I like the chainsaw accessory. He doesn't come with the gas can backpack like the original did, but oh, you know, who really wants to carry around a gas can on their back? But the sculpting looks great. I love the circular lenses too. I think they're like his welding goggles that he uses like sunglasses. And again, very, very faithful to the original character design, complete with a codpiece with a skull and crossbones. But for me, the absolute standout of every new reveal from the G.I. Joe team at San Diego Comic-Con is Ripper. Ripper was easily my favourite Dreadnok action figure in childhood. I just loved the look of the character with his scraggy beard, his mohawk. I really liked the assault rifle with the blade on the front. And yet again, very faithful to the original design. He's got the jaws of life that he can use for prying open, you know, vehicle doors, or I imagine with Ripper being a Dreadnok, he probably uses it to rip his way into vehicles and maybe even bank safes and things like that. But the original figure had a hydraulic power pack that he wore as a backpack that powered these hydraulic jaws. It's not shown in this render reveal. That doesn't mean that we're not going to get the power pack. But if we don't, I'm kind of wondering what is going to power those hydraulic jaws. You know, they need a hydraulic power unit to be able to operate. And if he's not carrying it on his back, where is the power pack? But that very small nitpick aside, this is my top pick of all the new reveals from San Diego Comic-Con this year. Now, what can I say about the Crimson 3-pack? It's a useless repaint. I don't have any particular interest in it. It is nice that you're going to get Tomax and Zaymot packed in together. I never really understood why when they released the classic versions of these figures, they released them as they were single release figures sold separately. And bizarrely, if I remember correctly, I think Pulse UK sold out of one before the other. So I don't know if people were buying one and not both. It seems a bit odd. You'd think, you know, being the twins, you would at least produce them in the same quantities. But yeah, I suppose at least this is a way to get them all in one pack, but I don't necessarily. As a matter of fact, the G.I. Joe Classified team does not need to keep redoing everything in Crimson. I'm a huge fan of the Crimson Guard from childhood. It's one of my favourite Cobra figures, right behind the eel and the snow serpent. But when you read the comic storyline from the 80s, the Crimson Guard were an elite unit within Cobra, and now producing all of these other G.I. Joe classified figures in Crimson is really taking away from what the Crimson Guards were, this elite unit. Having Crimson Bats and Crimson Baronesses and Crimson Twins. I know where they were called the Crimson Twins, but they weren't dressed in crimson. But doing all of these different characters in crimson, a Crimson Viper, you're really taking away from what made the original Crimson Guard so special. All right, now we get the Cobra SMS and Techno Viper. And I have seen a lot of people asking online, what's the SMS? It's the Sentry Missile System. Another slightly less deep cut, but a bit of a deep cut. The SMS came part of, I think it was a Sears exclusive 2-pack with I want to say a recoloured HISS tank. But this is basically a recoloured version of the G.I. Joe mobile missile system. And it looks really, really cool. Not a massive fan of the Techno Viper. I can kind of take him or leave him. But the SMS looks awesome. And I'm pretty certain now that they're paying for the tooling to produce this, we will at some stage get the classic G.I. Joe mobile missile system, the MMS, which actually came with Hawk, but he wasn't a general then, he was a colonel. It was Colonel Hawk. So maybe we're going to get Colonel Hawk as well when they eventually release the G.I. Joe MMS. Now we get to the first significant G.I. Joe vehicle release that is not a HasLab. We've got the Vamp and Clutch. I know we've had things like Trouble Bubbles in the past and motorbikes and sidecars, but every other major vehicle for the G.I. Joe classified line so far has been a HasLab. We've got the HISS tank and we've got the Dragonfly. This is not a HasLab. And I'm telling you, when this thing arrives at retail, it's gonna go gangbusters. The weaponry on the original Vamp was a laser. The end of this barrel kind of looks like a laser, but they've made the back end of it look a little bit more like a 50 cal machine gun. And I think it's a quite nice hybrid. I like the colours used. And the Clutch figure looks excellent as well. I think that's the same shotgun that they've shown with General Hawk, but here with some additional paint applications to make it look as though it's got a wooden pistol, buttstock and foregrip. But this is an extremely, extremely welcome addition to the G.I. Joe classified line. And proof that they can do something slightly bigger than a Ram Cycle or a Trouble Bubble at retail. And I really hope this is successful because it means we might eventually get a Cobra Stinger. And I'll be in for a couple of those if they ever get round to releasing them. But I do like that they're coming up with a sort of mid price point vehicle between the $300 HasLab vehicles and then the $70 Trouble Bubbles. We've found something somewhere in the middle. And if this retails for like $150, I'm going to be buying a couple of them. Now that pretty much wraps up all of the digital render reveals, but there was some more reveals back at the booth after the G.I. Joe classified panel. They actually teased at the end, head back to the booth where you're going to get your first glimpse of another G.I. Joe figure. And this was another barnstorming reveal, and that is Mutt and Junkyard. I love the sculpting on this Rottweiler and the addition of the tactical vest, which is very, very common for military working dogs in the modern age. I think they've done a great job on that. Just the fact that they've added it to the animal is a really nice touch. I think the action figure is very well sculpted. I like the snarling grimace on his face. We've got the nightstick there, which is potentially the same one that they've tooled up for Shockwave. No harm in that. And once again, another example of how they are really leaning heavily on the classic designs of these characters from the 1980s. They've steered clear of the early mistakes in the G.I. Joe classified line, and they're now giving us these faithful recreations. One new G.I. Joe action figure that they showed at San Diego Comic-Con though wasn't 100% faithful to the original design, but I do think it's a massive improvement, and that is Tripwire. Because the original Tripwire figure, he wasn't all that great. He had some goofy sculpting on him. And this new classified version, they've obviously taken a lot of inspiration from a modern military EOD suit. This evokes images from The Hurt Locker, as much as I hate that god-awful film. It's not to say that, the equipment and the uniforms the men were wearing in that film were not accurate. and I really like what they've done here with Tripwire. As of right now, the G.I. Joe team at Hasbro is absolutely killing it. I mean, the Marvel Legends team, I think the Knights wave that they have announced is one of the strongest Marvel Legends waves that we've had in several years. But the G.I. Joe Classified team right now is streets ahead of all of the other Hasbro action figure design teams. And I'm really pleased that we can live in a world right now where G.I. Joe and Valorverse Action Force can coexist. Action Force is giving me brand new, unique, modern military characters, where G.I. Joe Classified is scratching that nostalgic itch for all of my fellow collectors. I'm certainly not a completist when it comes to G.I. Joe Classified, but I did recently purchase a couple. Ryan has ordered me the Cobra Eel, because that's one of my favourite, well, it is my favourite Cobra figure from childhood, and I've recently purchased a Big Ben, and I'm looking forward to reviewing that figure when it arrives. But yeah, Classified is scratching that nostalgia itch, and Action Force is giving us something brand new and exciting modern military, and it's a great time to be a collector of 1 to 12 scale military action figures. So let me know in the comments below, which one was your favourite reveal? Were you as impressed by Ripper as I was? Are you more of a General Hawk kind of guy? Or do you really like the deep cut like Agent Helix? I'm also interested to know which of the name-only reveals you're most excited about. They announced Jinx, Torch, Retro Duke, Retro Scarlet. For me personally, I really want to see what this team does with a Jinx figure, but I would like to know which one of the name-only reveals that you're most looking forward to, and which of these digital render reveals blew your mind the most. As I said, for me, it was Ripper, with a close second being that Vamp. That Vamp is awesome. But let me know in the comments below what you thought of it, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.